Good evening. Well, was going to do this in the past day or so. The ranter is going to discuss his opinion and vent out into the void his thoughts on the death of Charlie Kirk. If you watched any of my stuff, and whenever I have time to do this stuff, this particular type of topic, in terms of either mass shooting or targeted shooting or targeted attacks on people, like the attack on Paul Pelosi. One of my problems that I have, not only the fact of the event itself or the loss of life, is the near instant reaction of people, that people have to immediately go on record and people immediately have to go into political mode concerning either the killer or the victim. As much as I was affected by this, I wanted to wait. I think a grace period probably should have been something along the lines of a week, as I've said before in previous videos. But since no one else bothers to wait, so I may as well join that particular part of the bandwagon. The other problem I have with this is the short-sightedness of people who are rejoicing over this, or find an ironic, morbid amusement over this, over Charlie Kirk's death. Finding the irony of being someone who is touted as a really heavy Second Amendment advocate, who has quoted to say, in paraphrasing, that that those who die of gun violence, it would almost be worth it, I'm paraphrasing, almost be worth it to maintain the Second Amendment. As you probably can tell, I'm not going to go into too much, actual detail here. I mean, I could have, pulled up the actual quote to say that, but I'm not paraphrasing it. But this isn't about details. I'm not going to go into, the circumstances of his death. I mean, outside the broad strokes that he was shot down at a event in Utah, political event in Utah, where he was debating people. People feel the need to do the caveat of, explaining their position in contrast or in comparison to a particular person like Charlie Kirk who dies. Like preempts, whatever the word that was going to be. Preface. Something closer. It's nearly 5 a.m., so pardon me. Preface what is going to be said on, first trying to explain ourselves before we go into our actual opinion on the matter. From Charlie Kirk's, from what I've seen of what he did as a day-to-day job, as being someone who is an influencer, a podcaster, influencer, ran Turning Point, political activism, and so forth, his particular stances on various things, how he promotes his stances and how he actually questions and or takes on debate of other people and how he treats the people that he debates with. I can honestly say that I thought he was a snotty form of a human being. Pretty much a twat, as the English would say. I am not going to heap fake praise on him because he died. But being a snotty twat of a human being does not deserve a death penalty. And the rhetoric that he pushes, the poisonous, toxic rhetoric that he made money in pushing, that he used the influence on others who would watch his stuff and give him ticks of that attention and viewership. No matter if you believe in the opposite of what he believes and you consider what he says to be vile, that is no grounds for him to die. So let's preface that before I get into this fully. I'm not going to unduly and overly, say ill of the dead. Not immediately. The snotty twat of a human being is kind of a fact of life. I don't know if that's really much of an insult. Depending. But what I mean about short-sightedness of people who actually do rejoice this, or say that he deserved it, you're seeing this in the moment. What happens afterwards? I'm not as concerned in terms of the morality or the empathy of the event of his death or that of his family. Another, knee-jerk thing that we should say is that, you should feel sorry for his family and his children, and you should. I'm not going to denigrate that. You should. No matter what type of a person he is in public, he had children that loved him, had a wife that loved him. No one should dishonor that. What do we say in our public? Whatever motivations we say in public on a particular topic to people out in the void, that doesn't necessarily translate to the people that we know in our everyday lives who care about us. But I'm looking at this, setting aside that moral point, I'm looking at this in the pragmatic, long-term view of this. And for those who are apparently on my side of the aisle, who think themselves superior to those who are on the other side of the aisle, especially those who are Trump supporters who are considered MAGA, who are very quick to point out, rightfully or not so rightfully, but maybe a knee-jerk, but quick to point out when there's a tragedy that happens and somebody does do a mass shooting and you find out that the rhetoric that they were inspired by comes from Trump or comes from someone Trump adjacent. Then we're all rush with our self-righteous indignation to condemn the whole movement. Not only Trump himself, but his supporters for being duped, to be lulled into whatever false narrative, some propaganda that would force them to do things reckless, do things horrible, like Patrick in Texas, who drove across Texas to go to El Paso to commit his mass murder of the invaders, which was the rhetoric that he had in his manifesto, which echoed very words that Donald Trump had said at the time. But for people who are on my side of the aisle here, or claim to be on my side of the aisle and maybe a little farther left, you don't see that you're doing the same thing as they do? Do you remember the assault on Paul Pelosi? Do you remember people cracking jokes and laughing, smirking and giggling over what they consider to be the details of the attack? You know, something about a dude in the underwear and him getting hit in the head with a hammer. His skull was caved in with a hammer, and people were laughing at that. And you were offended. I was offended at that. I made a video on that, and the language that I used in that video that I put on YouTube, YouTube took down. Because in my anger, I went beyond the guidelines of YouTube. It was one of the few strikes on my record as I've been doing these videos over the years. But if you're all now doing the jokes, finding the ironic, funny part of him dying from a gunshot wound and him being such a gun advocate, you are no different than those that you were saying were deplorable. You are being deplorable. To the family of Charlie Kirk. And you are opening the floodgate of reprisal. The wheel was already turning, where people are now hypersensitive to look for anything to get at anyone that says anything negative about Charlie Kirk, or showing that they're celebrating his death. People are being forced to apologize, as they should. But, again, those who may object to me pushing back on them, I don't know if you need glasses for far seeing, or maybe take the blinders off. But look who's in the White House. Look who the power base is centered around. Who has all the gears of control in the legislative, in your judicial, and the executive branch. Who has the power and influence to pressure media companies through suing them, to forcing them to fire people like Stephen Colbert, who on a daily basis before Charlie Kirk was killed pushed out crackpot propaganda. The shooting that was done to Charlie Kirk proves the false point of Donald Trump. The shooter hasn't been caught yet, but they're getting close. And if he doesn't die, if they capture him alive, I wonder what type of manifesto he's going to have in his justification for killing him. And what if any of his words going to be used as the rallying cry and anthem against oppositional activism? Because remember, any incidents can be used, can be twisted to help an agenda. The day before, Donald Trump went to a restaurant in D.C. for a little photo op of his night. He can walk around nice and safe in D.C. because of his takeover of having National Guard troops there to bring down the crime. That's another topic to get into. And he got protested to his face by the other people there, to the which Trump forced them out of the restaurant, but the damage was done. Imagine using Charlie Kirk's death, which he's already started to do because of it labeling the killers a far-left lunatic, which then he would tack on to far-left Democrats, which would tack on to protesters. But imagine, and you don't even have to imagine this long because it's about to happen, the death of Charlie Kirk being used as the political prop to justify what happens to protesters, what happens to those who show an opposition to this administration and to this thinking. Do you get that? Because I don't know if you get that. I don't know if you think you're only living in the moment and tomorrow doesn't exist. Oh, we have to clarify things here. I am one of the biggest vocal critics of Donald Trump throughout all my videos. And as such, I will never want anything bad to happen to him in terms of his health. I don't want anyone getting a nut screw loose in their heads to think that everything that he does requires him to be harmed. He shouldn't be, ever. And the reason why is not because of some deep down love for the man. No. It's because I tend to understand history. I tend to understand that political rhetoric, political power through thought, the propaganda doesn't die from violence. It intensifies. I'm going to throw out some examples of what I mean. And don't try to say that I'm making comparisons to Charlie Kirk or any of these other examples in terms of his power and influence. Because it actually doesn't matter what the names are. But the point. Brutus and Cassius and many of the Roman senators who assassinated Julius Caesar, they did so because they feared Julius Caesar was consolidating the power, that he was getting enough influence as dictator for life, that he was going to push himself and elevate himself to be an emperor. Prior to the Roman Empire, when it was still the Roman Republic, the Roman long history and memory of Romans hating the concepts of kings, when the Romans originally were under the royal yoke of the Etruscans. Brutus and Cassius and the other senators did not want the Republic to fall into empire, and saw that Julius Caesar was a threat to that he would become it. So on the Ides of March, they eliminated him. They killed him. Brutus was actually very close to Caesar. Loved him like a son loved a father, and yet he felt he was such a threat to Rome, the ideals of Rome, that he killed him. I'm sure in the short term, they thought they did the right thing, that they accomplished their goal. Certainly they weren't run out of Rome so immediately. But that's not the ending that they had. That their goal was not achieved. Not only did they end up being hunted down by Mark Antony and those loyal Romans to the line of Caesar, labeled the enemies of the Republic, and they died by their own hand or killed. But the empire that they were trying so desperately to stop from being born and was indeed born, and the first emperor was a Caesar. Octavian Caesar, the grandnephew of Julius Caesar, who became Augustus Caesar. In that example, and there are many others over the many long years of our existence, when political assassinations tend to happen, it doesn't go well for the assassins. Public opinion, 9 times out of 10, goes to those who are victim of such evil. No matter how you would justify the cause, in the end, there is no justification. There isn't. There is no justification in this moment in time. There was no justification for Charlie Kirk dying or being killed. No matter how awful his rhetoric is, how disgusting his rhetoric is, and how much influence and money and power that he gained from that propaganda, from the toxic rhetoric that he used to sow the seeds of people's fears. He did not deserve that. And as I said, political thought doesn't die from violence. It intensifies. So what is going to happen? Do you think the rhetoric that Charlie Kirk or any of the others is simply going to stop because of what happened to him? That people are going to be cold? They're going to see the error of their ways? No, they're going to prop him up, venerate him, deify, sanctify. Even when somebody's wrong, you make them right when you hit them. There are ways of combating this type of thought. You challenge them. You prove them to be wrong. People have done this before. People have done this to Charlie Kirk before. When he would go on to these debates and he finds a debater that he can't talk over, that he can't speed and filibust his point of view to try to fluster the other person, and if the other person gets the upper hand on him, then he stands there silently. It has been done. You have seen videos of this being done. That is how you do that. That's how you combat thought, with thought. Not with a gun. And if it's not, what would happen to the dynamic of our political system that gives you pause to be chuckling and laughing about this? Think of it on the other side. Think of what would be the reprisal. If you have people who get influenced by people like Charlie Kirk, or get influenced by the rhetoric of Donald Trump, and Charlie Kirk dies, and Trump blames the left for it. And then anyone who has a strong enough oppositional voice that gets heard, a finger gets pointed at them. What's going to happen to them? Because there are examples, like I said with Patrick, of people that do get their spirits moved through their political rhetoric and propaganda to make them act as if they themselves are being ordered and commanded to make America again through bloodshed, through intimidation, through violence. It has happened before. And again, when it happens to us, and we condemn it, something happens to one of them, and then we suddenly magically don't condemn it, but we magically go, oh, well, he deserved that, or whatever he said or did, yeah. No, you make yourself no different than those people you were condemning. Do you not get that? Or maybe you do get that, and you are resigning yourself to the fact that we are no different than them. I don't generalize because I find generalizing being lazy, but let's generalize in this particular moment. What makes you different than the people that you claim are sheep to MAGA, to sheep to Trump? What makes you different? When they rejoice and they say, fuck your feelings to anyone that gets hurt or lose their jobs because of Doge or some executive order that cripples a whole demographic of people. And they laugh at that. And you stew and you get mad at that. What makes you different when someone like Charlie Kirk gets killed and you are happy dancing over it? It's not arrogant of me to say, and it's not untrue for me to say that I strive to be better than that. And you should too. They should be better than that. There is a mental issue involved here. I know that it's the latest scapegoat to protect people from, saying boo to their precious little guns. That it's a mental illness thing. It's nothing to do with the stockpile of weapons that are easily obtained as if you put a quarter into a vending machine. It's not that. It's mental illness. Well, there is an issue of mental illness here, or at least a mental, emotional issue. And people like Charlie Kirk, truthfully, if you be honest, people like Charlie Kirk, people on that side of the aisle and people on the left side of the aisle that does do this too, fan the flames of such anxieties, of insecurities, of minority syndrome, inferiority complex. They fan the flames of conspiracy theories. To the point where even in mainstream media, opinion rules over fact. And when that happens too much, how can you believe fact? When a piece of news comes down, either on Fox News, MSNBC, or CNN, a fact comes down, a piece of news comes down, and then they have a political analyst that slants one way or the other, tries to explain it to you, and spin it to fit their viewpoint and consequently fit your viewpoint. In the various times that there has been political violence of one form or another, be it assaults or killings or just intimidations or bullying or whatever, people try to pay the lip service to the concept of, hey, maybe we should dial it down. That maybe we shouldn't be so partisanly tribal that any slight on our side means we have to drop a bomb in response. See, but the problem with that, and that is not untrue. When you hear that, it is not wrong for anyone to say. But the problem with that is that when the person says that, but they only say that on one side, ignoring when their side does it, that's a problem. When someone takes this Charlie Kirk issue of him dying, and then immediately, while the body is not cold yet, throws his death onto the rhetoric of the left, of bringing up how people call Trump a fascist or a Nazi, or their point of view is fascist or Nazi, and completely ignore their own rhetoric to demonize one side. They're not telling you a fact here. They're telling you the spin. That they're all victims of the evil left. It would be the same thing if the left considered themselves, and I'm doing generalizations here, if we all on the left consider ourselves our victims to the machinations of evil of the right, and we are completely and totally innocent. We need to strive to be better. And I think the allure of not being better is attractive. That we see this Trump administration, we see the actions that they take, we see what his followers say on our social medias, and those that go so far-fetched that still gets liked by the Trump administration, that gives them justification and kudos for them saying horrendous things. That it's attractive for us on the other side, who think we're so much better than them, to fall into the same trap, fall into the same propaganda quagmire, just on the other side of the swamp. You want to be morally, emotionally, and mentally superior than them? Then don't act like them when something like this happens. When I heard about Charlie Kirk dying, I went onto my social medias, from the group that I admin to my own feed, and I made it clear that I will not tolerate anyone doing a happy dance or celebrating Charlie Kirk's death, and it was not going to be a debate. And those who did try to debate me against, I challenged them back. No. I never liked Charlie Kirk. And after his death, I am not going to be liking Charlie Kirk. I'm not going to forget what he has said that has harmed people, that has inspired people to harm people. If not physically, then mentally and emotionally. To foster and to prop up people with conspiracy theories and making them not feel like that whatever they're thinking might actually be wrong or needs to be clarified, but saying, oh, you're right, something really is conspiracy happening. This is not going to go well for those who are doing the Happy Dance celebration. And despite the fact that I understand the criticism of, oh, well, we need to have our flags at half-mast for Charlie Kirk, and not have it for the children that died in the school shooting that happened the same day that we barely hear about. Or at least the children that were injured in a mass shooting that happened the same day. How that was something that we were supposed to get over, according to President Trump, that it just happens, we just have to get over it. Then Charlie Kirk died. Oh no, he's a fallen patriot. Forget about those children that died. Forget about all the children that die. No, we need a half mass for him. Or the politician and the spouse that died in Minnesota because they're Democrats. I guess we don't need a half mass for that. See, there's the problems on condemning one side and ignoring your side. I don't have any much else to say on this. I'll soon do a proper video on what's going on in our lives, be it the attempted takeovers of blue cities or blue state cities, cause of damn crime. Even though places like Memphis and places that are in red states or that are run by red Republican voting governors or red Republican mayors, that no one's asking for National Guard to go into those places that have worse crime. We'll get into that. We'll get into the drone strikes into Poland, or crossing over Poland to try to get to Ukraine and getting shot down by NATO. We'll go over what's going on in Israel and Gaza. And the 1001 shocks that flesh is heir to when it comes to this administration currently in power, and those who ride on that McDonald's stained coattails of Donald Trump. In other words, it will be a video of business as usual. The ranter rants because the urge to rant is always rising. And we'll leave it with the last word that once again, you do not defeat political thought, political rhetoric through violence. You only make it grow. You only make it worse. And in the end, no matter how much you laugh at that victim, in the end you become the victim. Look beyond today.